Hey everybody, Thomas Joseph here, and today we are talking cornbread. Now, we've received a lot of comments from you guys asking us for the perfect cornbread recipe because your cornbread at home is either turning out too dry and crumbly or it's too dense and chewy. Today I have a great recipe to share with you, and I think the best part about this recipe is that you can customize it by adding in some different mix-ins. So let's get started here with probably the key ingredient, and that is cornmeal. That's gonna make a really great cornbread. I have a very flavorful stone ground cornmeal here. And if you guys remember, we did a video about cornmeal and the different types and the different grinds. This is a fine grind and it's stone ground, like I said before, and you can really tell it's stone ground because it has a slight variation in texture. There are some granules of corn that are a little bit more coarse, and then there are powdery grains of cornmeal, and this variation in size is a key characteristic of stone ground cornmeal. Now, to this, I'm gonna add 1 cup of all-purpose flour, a little bit of sugar. I have 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, and sugar, what it does is it helps to create a tender cornbread, and it also gives a slight sweetness, which I think is important when you're making a cornbread. You want to have a little bit of sweetness there. And to this, I'm gonna add some salt, 1.5 teaspoons of coarse salt. We always use coarse salt here at Martha Stewart Living. So if you don't have coarse salt at home and you only have fine salt, you want to be careful and use less salt so that it equals out, so that it doesn't create too salty of a cornbread. I'm going to add some baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Baking powder is typically sold in the United States as double acting. That means that it leavens at 2 different stages during the process of making and baking, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And the baking soda here is going to react with any of the acidic ingredients in this batter and help to leaven it even more. And the acidic component I'm using is buttermilk. This is the dairy that I'm using. So if you didn't have buttermilk at home and you needed a quick substitute, we did a whole video on this. You could take regular whole milk and add a little bit of vinegar to it to acidify it. You could water down some yogurt or sour cream. So I have 1 cup of buttermilk, and to that I'm gonna add 2 whole eggs, and these are room temperature eggs, guys. Again, we're making a quick bread today, so these ingredients are all gonna be room temperature. It will create a nice smooth batter, and that batter will then bake up nice and evenly in the oven, and it will give you a good texture in the final baked good. I'm gonna add these 2 eggs right to my buttermilk, whisk them up a little bit, breaking them up, and 1/2 stick of unsalted butter that has been melted and cooled to room temperature. You don't want this to be too hot, otherwise it's gonna curdle in your buttermilk here. And then just mix this up, you guys, and in a few seconds here, you have your wet ingredients and your dry ingredients ready for your cornbread. And now we're gonna just combine the wet and the dry ingredients. Now, if you wanted to change this batter up and add a little bit more flavor, you could add some chopped up jalapenos. That would be fantastic. A sharp cheddar cheese would be really great. It's gonna add a nice cheesy flavor, but also it's gonna be a little bit more moist, your cornbread. Some corn kernels, either fresh corn here, or if you had frozen corn, that would be really great, tossed in. And if you like a little bit of spice but not jalapeno, you can add a little bit of cayenne pepper. It's kind of up to you and what your preference is with cornbread and how you would want to see this doctored up. Maybe even a little bit of herbs would be fantastic. But today I'm just going to do a simple all-purpose cornbread, and I'm going to pour in my wet ingredients and then mix this together ever so slightly, you guys. You really don't want to overwork this, otherwise your cornbread is going to be really tough. So if there are a few lumps in your batter here, that's totally fine. Now make sure your oven is preheated to 400 degrees with the rack in the middle of the oven. I'm using a 9-inch square baking pan here that has been buttered and lined with parchment. Now if you had a specific type of baking pan you wanted to make these in, whether it's a muffin tin to create individual portions, you could certainly do that. Or in little cast iron skillets, that would be fantastic as well. You just have to watch the baking time on them. So this goes into that 400 degree oven for 20 to 25 minutes, and it will get a light golden brown color. And then you want to remove it to a wire rack to cool completely. So I'm just going to spread this out into the corners and get it right into the oven, because as you can see, it's already starting to leaven with that baking soda and buttermilk reacting. So I want to make sure that this gets nice and fluffy, so I'm going to get it right into the oven so it can bake up. All right, guys, so the cornbread has cooled completely. When it comes out of the oven, you want to make sure that you let it cool slightly in the pan before you remove it and let it cool completely again. Now, I'm going to just remove the parchment from the bottom here. And this recipe, you guys, is really fantastic, not just for eating as an accompaniment to your bowl of chili or on your Thanksgiving table, but this could also be used because it has such a great texture for stuffings as well, for a cornbread stuffing. It's not gonna completely get mushy and all crumbly. It still has a good amount of texture, so it will create a delicious cornbread stuffing or dressing. So I'm just cutting these into squares here. I'm getting about 16, but again, you can cut this into whatever size pieces you want. It has a lovely texture to it. You can see that it has a nice fluffy texture, but it still has some structure to it. Arrange it on a platter, serve it with a little bit of salted butter would be fantastic, and maybe a drizzle of honey, or maybe you could do a pickled jalapeno butter. That would be great if you wanted something spicy. But there you go. I really encourage you guys to try this recipe and add in whatever flavors or toppings you'd like. I'm sure you're gonna enjoy it. I know I am. See you later, guys. Hey everybody, Thomas Joseph here from Kitchen Conundrums. Now, if you want to see more videos like this, click here to see more videos, or click here to subscribe.